brake lever. As you brake, it pulls the cable through the outer housing. The inner wire has been pulled through the outer housing. On here is the lock nut, which you can lock to stop the adjustment nut. If we pull the lock nut out, we can adjust the cable tension by turning this nut in and out. So if we turn it out, we're pulling the cable and we're reducing the space between the brake pads down at the brake arms. As we wind it in, we're loosening it and increasing the distance between the brake pads at the brake arms. We can also remove the cable if we need to. That is done by winding these two nuts, and see there's a gap in each one, and line them up with the gap in the lever, and this comes all the way out and out here. That's how you remove and replace the inner wire that goes into the outer casing. You can see it moves inside this outer casing. So I'll wind that back on. Two nuts. This one here is for adjusting the lever itself, and so you can adjust the tension in the lever or the looseness. And there's a spring inside. Yes, I suppose you can see it in here. That spring is returning the lever back to its position. There's also two springs in the brake arms down at the wheel, which are returning the brake into its position. On the back here is the nut, is the screw for adjusting, for tightening it on the handlebar. So we can loosen this one, and we adjust it or pull it off. So that's that one there. And then in here is a grub screw for adjusting the reach of the brake arm. If we wind that in, it pulls this back. So if we have small hands that can't reach the full distance, we wind that in, and it brings the brake lever closer to the handlebars, but it also reduces the amount of play you have at the brake arms. So as you pull this back, you've lost a couple of millimeters of reach or play down at the brake arm, but you can do that if you've got small hands. You've got to be careful that it's a small Allen key in there, and you can round that out quite easily. So there we have it, the brake lever, and then we'll move on to the brake arms down at the wheel. That's at the other end. Here we are at the other end of the brake cable coming down from the levers. This is the brake cable from the lever. It goes through the noodle, through this little rubber sleeve, and then into the lock screw there. So we can remove that cable or adjust on the bike. This is how you adjust the reach into the wheel by loosening this, or up at the lever with the adjustment screw, but this is bigger adjustments here. And we've shown you how the cable fits into that noodle. You need that end piece, the cap fits into there. The noodle does the bending of the inner wire, and then you have this rubber sleeve, which is not really needed, but it can help protect a little bit from dust getting in there. In my experience, it doesn't do too much. So that's how the cable comes in the end here. We have the brake arm and the brake pads, and they're pivoting on here. They're driven by a spring. This is the spring. It comes down, winds around, and then exits down here. So this one exits down here, and it feeds into this piece here, which allows us to adjust the spring tension. So if I pull this out, you can see this bolt, this little nut here. Press. If we wind that in, it pushes against that and adjusts the spring tension. The other way to do it, so that's the full spring, is this end piece here, this bit of protruding bead, fits into a plate on the fork, and there's three settings, three holes on that plate. So if it's sitting in here, we can choose the 1, 2 or 3, or 1, 2, 3 setting to adjust the tension down at the fork. Often on bikes with loose brakes, this spring is popped out behind here, so this little knob here keeps the spring in place. So these are pivoting like this. They're kept on the bike, screwed on the blade on the bike. This fits into the fork, and we're winding this in. If we wanted to do that adjustment of the spring tension, this is winding in to the fork, so we can take the whole brake off if we wanted to put it back on. So that's how we remove those. For the brake pads, we can adjust the brake pads, the 5mm wrench in here, and we can adjust up and down, and the angle as well. And there's 2 sets of washers with concave and convex sides. So if we take this off, there's a washer. One, it's the convex one, and then on this side is another set. Convex. Okay. If we want to put it back on, we want the one set on the inside, usually the smaller set. And on the bike, we have to reach inside and put that in, and then put the other set on, which can be a bit fiddly on the bike. Then the washer, then this nut. And on the bike, we've got this on the rim. Oh, I'm using the wrong one. This on the rim. On the rim, when we have it on the rim, if the wheel is coming this way, we want that brake pad, the front of the brake pad, to touch just slightly before the rear. If you have them both, if the front and the rear touching at the same time, you get a rattling or squealing, because it sets up simple harmonic motions. So we want that front one to engage just before the rear. Front just before the rear. And we want it to sit right on the brake rim but not touching the tyre. We covered that in the safety check. So that's the brake pad and how we adjust the brake pad. I think that's about it for these long arm brakes. So we get the pad, the sets of washers, spring tension adjustment. The spring comes down through here, it sits in behind this. Once we move it onto the bike, it will make a lot more sense. It's 2 sets.